introduce our Vice President, Cindy Neighbor, and she will tell us about this morning's program.
All right, a word of wisdom to the panelists. You heard the words, eat the mic. Eat the mic, because otherwise we have people that may not hear your remarks. Second of all, when you speak, because we're all at the same level, if you can stand when you speak, then they'll put a face with a name. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Let's get started.
Or use the podium, maybe?
They could use the podium if you choose to stand at your seat or come to the podium. Please don't be shy. You will get your exercise this morning so that then you can have a piece of pumpkin bread. We have 4 fantastic people here representing different sections of education. And although the League does support public education, we need to be educated and informed on the other opportunities that are in our community. So today we have an individual representing the public school system, and I'm going to read what that responsibility is, so you can kind of put a face with the name. The person here with public schools is Dr. Christy Ziegler, if you'll stand for just a moment. Public education in the United States is universally required at the K-12 level and is available at state colleges and universities for all students. K-12 public school curriculum, budgets, and policies are set through locally elected school boards who have jurisdiction over individual school districts. State governments set overall education standards, often mandate standardized tests for K through 12 public school systems, and supervise, usually through regions, state colleges, and universities. Funding comes from the state, the local, and the federal. Thank you, Dr. Ziegler. The next one we have is Cassandra Barton. Cassandra, if you please stand. Cassandra is here today representing charter schools / virtual schools. And if any of you want to read this again or get a little bit more into the weeds in constitutional education, there's a large poster over here. All right, charter schools are publicly funded schools that operate outside the direct control of local school districts under a publicly issued charter that gives them greater than other public schools, that gives them greater autonomy, than other public schools have over curriculum, instruction, and operations. A virtual school, or cyber school, describes an institution that teaches courses entirely or primarily through online methods. It has been suggested that a virtual school is an online learning platform offered by an educational organization whereby individuals can earn credits in a particular area of interest, which can be counted toward graduation or advancement to the next grade. And Cassandra is with Insight. Is that correct? All right, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Barton, Todd Barton. I just married you two. We have Todd Kangas. How different is that? Todd, I'm sorry. Homeschooling, also known as home education, is the education of children inside the home as opposed to in the formal settings of a public or private school. Home education is usually conducted by a parent or a tutor. And Todd gave me a little bit more information too. He still has one at home that he's finishing his homeschooling. My wife is. And his wife is the teacher. And their homeschool mission is to raise and release godly, productive citizens. Nationally, about 87% of school-aged children attend public schools, about 10% attend private schools, and more than 3% are homeschooled. So those are the percentages as we look across the nation. Our final speaker today probably doesn't need to have any special things said about him because his name is notorious. Notoriously good or notoriously energetic or knowledgeable is Dr. Dale Dennis. He is the Assistant Superintendent for the State Board of Education. Dr. Dennis, would you please stand? And I've known this man for a very long time, and he has more up here than any of us collectively could put together in educational knowledge. So he has the history. And he said, don't believe me, take it. All right, let's get started because we have a jam-packed morning to start with here. And I just put my questions down. All right. Our first question to the panelists, and remember to hold the mic close, eat it, and stand when you speak. Please share what you consider your greatest challenge has been. And we'll start with Todd.
Am I on? No. Am I on? Okay, probably the greatest challenge for homeschooling is the fact that you have a mom, typically 95% of the time, doing education. So her career that she may have aspired to or something has changed. She's now staying at home with her child or children 24/7, no vacation, no relief. And so the greatest challenge I have homeschooling is my wife back here who's come in. We've been homeschooling for over 30 years. We have 8 children. And how to encourage and support her, because it's hard. She's trying to quit homeschooling almost daily. It's a hard task. And most of you would say, I could never homeschool. And that's why only 2 to 3% of people are homeschooling right now, because it is a life commitment, a challenge, and how do we encourage people to continue on with the vision they began with. So for homeschoolers, the greatest challenge, I think, is to stay the course, to hold on. And the question I say to people is, why are you homeschooling? Because if you don't know why, when the things get a little challenging, you're going to be quitting that pursuit. So that's our greatest challenge.
I think the greatest challenge that we face is continuing to identify and meet the needs of our learners. We talk a lot about college and career readiness, and that's where we are preparing students to leave our institution, our schools, and be ready for the world outside. But I just pose the challenge back to each of you to think about, what does the world look like for this year's kindergarten class that will graduate in 2028? 2028. I don't know that we can even fathom what the world will be like because things change so rapidly. So from a public school perspective, the challenge is knowing what the needs of our learners will be, to be world ready, life ready, and be responsive along the way in what we do with our curriculum, how we provide instruction with relevance to the world that we're preparing them for, and also the professional development so that our teachers feel prepared to handle the changing world and dynamics of our learners. I think that's the greatest challenge, thinking ahead towards 2028.
I think, so we do have to eat tonight. I think for virtual schools, in general, our biggest challenge is ensuring that our, what we call learning coaches, or our parents, guardians that are going to be enrolling their students with us, understand the model that they're signing up for, making sure that it's a good fit for their student, that they can take on the portions that they're going to need to take on as a learning coach, that their student understands the responsibility that comes with schooling in a virtual setting versus a bricks and mortar setting, and that we are able to see their needs, understand what we can do to better support them when we don't have them there face to face. Sometimes that's a very hard thing to do. We've got a lot of great resources and supports in place on our staff, as I know many other virtual schools in the state do too. But not having that face-to-face where you can gauge a student's kind of how their day is going just by the look on their face that you see in the morning, having to figure out a way to do that virtually is definitely a challenge each year. So we just continue to explore ways to build relationships. That's a huge key in the virtual world, to have those relationships, not only with the students that we're instructing, but also with those learning coaches that are at home, because we really have to take that team approach if they're going to be in a virtual school.
It's an honor to be with with such a distinguished group. It is an honor. I get to visit with superintendents and legislators, but I don't get this honor very often. But it is good to be here and be here with this distinguished panel. You know, I'll get into it a little bit later on, but probably the biggest challenge deep down we face is being able to recruit and retain great teachers. I really worry about that. I just gave a speech yesterday about that to some folks that were work for the Teachers Association. But I'm really worried about the number of people retiring and the number of people entering the profession. You know, Kansas is phenomenal. Academically, we were ranked usually in the top 10 on anything you want to measure. And we're funding it at, expenditures about in the middle. We pay our teachers about 38 in the nation on an overall average, 38. And I'll never forget, any of you ever know or meet Mark Parkinson? Mark's a great guy, and he, so is his wife. I heard them both speak at different Challenge to Work banquets during his 10 years together, but he made the comment, he said, in the private sector, I'll never forget this, I don't know what else he said, but I remember this one. He said, in the private sector, he said, if you're paying your people in the bottom 10 and your results is in the top 10, you think you died and gone to heaven. And he said, you have to take care of teachers. The rest of us are just supporters. We're helpers. The teachers are the ones that really are, and I'm worried about that. We've got a new law in effect now on working after retirement. There's 13 different classes within that law. And in 2000, June 30th of 2017, for example, if the law stays the same, the only people that will be able to continue to be employed working after retirement will be those that are in special classes that the state board is required to choose those hard-to-fill positions. But when you choose 5 people, 5 groups of people, and special ed will be one automatic for everywhere. What works in one part of the state may not be very good. And this will be surprising to those of you kind of in education. It'll come out here in another week. You know what, Ruth? 3, 4, 5 years ago, you didn't even hardly advertise. Christy didn't know how to advertise for elementary teachers. She just went to the file and pulled out. She had several hundred and decided which one she wanted. That isn't the case anymore. They'll be in the top 5 of hard-to-fill positions. A self-contained elementary teacher. We had some districts start this year that could not fill that. And give you a quick example in this arena. We had one district, it's a small district north of Manhattan. When you're close to a university, people go back to work on a degree. Usually it's easy to get teachers, particularly elementary teachers. 2 years ago, he advertised for an elementary position. This is up at Randolph. We call it Little Blue Valley. And that's their name officially. He advertised for elementary, and he had 67 applicants. This year he advertised, he got 7, and 6 of them, or 4 of them have been fired someplace else. So he really only had 3. He went from 67 to 3. And so Dodge City, Garden City, Liberal, and Southwest Florida, they're growing, not rapidly, but growing each year as a general rule. They started, in some cases, with long-term subs. So my biggest worry for the welfare of the state is being able to recruit and retain teachers and be able, when I say recruit, that at the higher ed level, teachers can't wait to get in the classroom. That's what you want. They can't wait to get there. And I'll tell you what, we're producing. The ones that are going in are doing a well of a job. They're better trained and better prepared than ever before. So that's the biggest worry, and I'll tell you some of the issues to talk about that gets into that a little later. Thank you.
exercise. I'm doing my squats. Okay, our next question, I'm going to start with Dr. Ziegler. We'll just rotate through so no one feels picked on or left out. And that is, please share what you consider your best success has been.
Say that again.
Please consider what you think your best success has been.
In terms of success, I think one of the most immediate things that comes to mind is expanding or putting in place some of the programs that in the Shawnee Mission School District we call the signature programs. But it goes beyond that. I'll tell you a little bit about those programs. There are options for students as they get into the high school level where they can start to select based on their possible interests beyond high school in programs that might lead them down the course of legal studies. They may be interested in biotechnology. They may be interested in engineering as a potential career. Computer science. We just added a pathway. We've got the introductory courses in place that's partnered with a national organization called Project Lead the Way, a network of universities that have business partners in the field of engineering in multiple areas. But it's a national curriculum, and it is aligned with AP and College Board now. So those are pretty exciting programs to offer our students, where they are growing into potential careers and getting to explore the world of those professionals and connect. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, that's all part of what I just was referring to. We've been expanding our STEM curriculum programs down to the elementary level. So we have kindergartners and first graders that can now tell you what it's like to think like an engineer. I'm a parent, and I have a 10-year-old fifth grader. I have a little guy that's going to be a kindergartner next year. And the possibilities that those programs will bring to my children and others is exciting, because what we're teaching kids at the early stages is having that persistence in learning that's important. The mindset of having grit and problem solving, and if something doesn't work for an engineer, what do? They don't give up. Talk about fail as our first attempt at learning. We keep going. We persist. We think differently, and we keep building until we get the answer that we want to get. So those are pretty exciting pieces that are happening in our district right now, and I consider them success. I was very, very blessed to join the district last year. I'm in my second year. My first year serving as assistant superintendent, and one of the charges that I was given is expand STEM programming. So that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and it's exciting to see what our kids are capable of doing. And with that, we are looking at expanding the relevance I talked about earlier, so kids know where are they going with these skills that they're learning in our classrooms. What do real professionals do with these skills? This year, through partnership with our business community, you guys know about Burns & McDonnell. I have a little name there. Burns & McDonnell gave the next generation science standards, the standards by which we teach, to their engineers and said, tell us what you do with these on a daily basis. In your jobs, what do you do with these standards? Well, we had the opportunity to share some professional development with our teachers that Burns & McDonnell hosted. We had 86 of our teachers go on a professional in-service day, one of those days when kids are out of school. What do? 86 of our teachers went to Burns & McDonnell. They got the relevance, they got the connection, they got to hear from the engineers to say, this is how this impacts us. What you're teaching makes a difference, and this is where it's going. So I consider that another success, is that we are looking at different ways in education to partner with our business partners so that we do know how the world is outside of our walls, and that we are making sure our learning experiences are relevant for kids.
I think one of the I think one of the biggest successes in the virtual world that I see every year on graduation is the fact that we are able to serve students from all walks of life. They come to us. The number of reasons is the same as the number of enrollments we have. Everyone has a different reason. It may be that they were struggling in a brick and mortar dealing with bullying. It may be that they have health issues where they can't physically be around a lot of other students their same age. They may be credit deficient. They may be trying to graduate a year early because they have something really cool that they want to go do after graduation, and they just can't wait to get that part of their life started. And being able to work with those students, get them in the courses that they need, challenge them to the appropriate level for them, work with their learning coaches, and work with their students on their personal goals and really look at that student as an individual and then see them graduate. We do have a physical graduation ceremony every year and walk across that stage. It's just a huge success every year. It's a great reminder why we do what we do, why we're here. And sometimes that's easy to lose sight of in the virtual world where you don't get to see them every day. So that's just a wonderful success that we celebrate. At Insight, we also have an adult high school program where adults in really across the state, it can be anywhere in the state, can come back, continue working, and earn their true high school diploma if they haven't earned one before. So our graduation ceremony, we see a mix. We've got the teenage graduates, but we also have adults graduate, and we've seen amazing stories come out of that. A couple of years ago, we had a father-daughter graduating. She said, well, if you're going to make me stick with school and finish, you need to go back and finish too, and they did it together. And so that was really neat to see. We've seen some folks in their 60s that never thought that this would ever happen for them cross that stage at the end of the year. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of tears on graduation, but they're always happy tears. And then doors open for them. I have one gentleman last year graduate. He'd never been able to have benefits at his job, and by earning his high school diploma, he was going to be able to go back, take a different role within the company he was currently working for, and he would, for the first time ever, be able to have benefits for his family. So seeing those things, knowing that what we do day to day means something different for every one of our students, but that we are here and with them 100%, and then seeing that come to fruition each year, I think is our biggest celebration and success.
Todd, I'm going to make you next.
Okay. I would think one of the greatest successes of homeschooling is saving the taxpayers of the United States $24 billion. Because since our children aren't enrolled in the public schools, your tax dollars aren't having to be paid to the school district. We're bearing the expense of that. So we think that's a significant savings, which is a success. We also look at, when you look at standardized test scores, the public school it ranks from 1 to 99, so the average public school student would be at 50 percentile. That's how we do statistics. And average homeschool students are ranging 15 to 30 percentile above their public school peers. They're also showing better in socialization in other studies, because one of the questions people say, well, you're homeschooled, how do you ever socialize? And they show that they work better in age-integrated situations, that they're leaders in their peer groups, and that they're socialized most by the people that love them the most, their families, their parents. So we find that academically they're doing very well, socialization well, we're saving the taxpayers, but because most homeschool families are faith-based, the most important thing we see is we're passing on our faith and values to our children at a far greater rate. People from an evangelical Christian background are seeing that 2/3 of their children, according to research, are leaving the church first year after graduation from high school, whereas homeschoolers have a 94% retention rate 5 years after of people saying they adhere to and strongly agree with the beliefs of their parents. So if you're looking at something to not just simply prepare your children academically, but character-wise, and carrying on your own vision and faith and values, homeschooling has had the greatest success of any of the educational models out there.
All right. This is going to be an easy question, and I did send these questions out to our panelists so that they could gather this information if they didn't have it at their fingertips. So I didn't want to leave anybody in the clouds. The next question is approximately how many students are in your program? And let's start with Cassandra.
Sure. We have 2 virtual schools that I work with. Kansas Virtual Academy serves kindergarten through 6th grade, and then we have Insight School of Kansas that serves 7th grade through, we call it adult 12th grade, so all the way through. We have about 1,000 kindergarten through adult 12th grade in our program.
Cassandra, are those all Kansas students?
Yes, to be enrolled in a virtual school in the state of Kansas, you have to reside in the state of Kansas. Every year, students, if they're returning or new, have to submit an updated proof of residency Because we are a public school, we do have to ensure that they are living in the state of Kansas.
Does that include the adults?
Yes, it does include the adults.
How many adults do we have?
We have about 150 adults this year, so it is a smaller population of the group, but still a very important population.
Todd?
One. We've had 7 graduate. Let's see. We have 1,200 families in Midwestern educators on the Kansas side. And you'll see that, again, approximately 2 to 3% of the general student population is being home taught. And so that conveys what, on the Kansas side, you typically see now, when you see somebody who's got a large family, people used to say to me, are you Catholic or Mormon? And now is it, no, are you Catholic, Mormon, or homeschooler? And so typically homeschool families seem to be having more than 2 children. But so we know that there's just over 5,000 that in the families represent the 1,200 families plus. And that's not just all the homeschoolers. Those are the only ones that choose to sign up with us. There's a significant number that don't sign up and join our group.
We are just shy of 28,000 in our enrollment. We just experienced our second consecutive year of growth in the Shawnee Mission School District, and I believe since 1992 it was our highest enrollment growth that we have experienced. So we're very excited about the families that are choosing to be in Shawnee Mission. I also wanted to share that we do have some part-time enrollments, and we do provide services to students in private and parochial setting, and also some homeschool families that come in for some elective courses.
As you can tell, this is a team effort. All right, Todd, we're going to go back to you. How is your program funded?
Blood, sweat, and tears. Typically, a homeschool family is a single-income family, and it's about $600 a year for educating our students. And so we fund it ourselves. And we are grateful for partnerships, because one of the things we've found is that like Shawnee Mission, Blue Valley, different schools will allow, and it's become a more welcoming environment than it was in 1988. Well, like in 1987, when Johnson County prosecuted a mom for homeschooling and found her in violation of truancy, or in Nebraska when they locked up a church. Oh, in Nebraska when they locked up a church because they were homeschooling in 1986. So that's where we came from, Nebraska. We moved here in '88. But to see the environment has changed, where the public schools are welcoming and doing this, and there's under even consideration where a bill before the state legislators was introduced this year for allowing homeschoolers to participate in secondary activities like sports and other things with the public schools. I guess they're trying to recruit homeschoolers because the last McDonald's All-American was a homeschool child basketball player here in Kansas City. But no, there's athletic things and other things. So the schools are welcoming more and more things and are allowing people to take elective and specialized things, which we're grateful for, because it helps to serve the needs of people that are paying taxes and gives them a chance to take advantage of some of those wonderful programs.
We are funded by your tax dollars, quite simply. So I don't know that much more needs to be shared about that. The 2 areas in terms of the local option budget, and Mr. Dennis might be the resident expert to speak to that. Capital outlay and operation dollars. So there are 2 different buckets of funds that come to us. Capital expenses tend to be more for our larger improvement needs, ongoing expenses to maintain our facilities, equipment versus the other side of things, which goes to fund salaries and more of the instructional needs at the classroom level.
We are also funded by your tax dollars, just like any other public school. Virtual schools that are accredited with the state participate in the state count day. It's a little bit different for the virtual setting, but we do those same types of things in order to get our funding each year.
I am going to have Dale Dennis at the end of this kind of go through the funding process. It's a little bit different when you're at the state level because you're working with so many entities. And so rather than have him give the next 30-minute discussion, we'll move on to a couple of other questions. And I want to allow enough time for all of you to share your questions with our panelists. Our last question is your program mandated to meet state standards, and which tests are you required to use to assess your students?
Yes, we are required to meet the mandates that are placed by the federal government, and also we follow the regulations that are adopted by our state board of education and our state government. In terms of the tests that we're required to take, we do take the Kansas assessment program, which has been a little bit in flux as we are moving to new assessments. So this year will be the first year that we have new data based on a new assessment system. So it's kind of an exciting time to anticipate what that might be.
We are the same. We do align to all federal and state requirements of public schools, adhere to the KCCRS, the Career and College Ready standards. Our teachers work very hard to make sure that the curriculum is encompassing those. And yes, we are also excited for the first results for this new state assessment that should be coming out here anytime this month. And we do have to give the state assessments to our 3rd through 11th graders every spring, and we do have to do that face-to-face. So you can imagine that that's interesting times for a virtual school, but we get it done every year, and it's actually kind of a fun time for the kids, not the testing part. They like to see other kids in their grade levels and see their teachers, and so that's a really neat thing that goes along with being mandated to take state assessments each year.
Homeschooling is a non-accredited private academy, and we follow the Kansas equivalency hours and education things for graduation, and homeschoolers are welcomed at the Kansas Regents universities because of doing the ACT test. One of the things I found interesting, I was on a panel similar to this, at that time, one of the panelists was the superintendent of the Kansas City, Missouri public schools, and so we had, as homeschoolers, something in common with them because both of us are unaccredited. But so you don't have to be accredited to get into college. And so we find, though, that we do follow the state requirements because we need to do those in order to have our students graduate. And like I said, we are welcomed by colleges and universities all over the United States.
We'll get to the question and answer period here in just a few minutes. And when we do that, I'm going to ask a favor of all of you out there so that you get as much exercise as the panelists have had today. So if you do have a question when we get to that point, if you would please come up to the podium or just in front of the podium and pose your questions so we're not running all over out there, because it's hard for us to film this presentation when he's running all over the room. So we're going to save him a little time and energy today. To wrap this up in a little bit, I'm going to have Dale Dennis speak to you about what's happening with the school funding, what's going on with the State Board of Education. He may frown, but he has a lot of smiles too. This is a man that you can ask any question, and I think you can get just a very, very factual answer to any question that you have. So I'm going to give this to Dale for a few minutes, and we'll get down to the meat of what all of you have to ask.
Thank you. It is good to be here. We've had a long history in Kansas of trying to take care of our kids. And we also have a history. We adopt a formula that works and works pretty well. And then we let it go for several years and don't change it, don't fund it. For example, inflation can impact a lot of things. For example, look at your utilities now and 10 years ago. Look at your health insurance now and 10 years ago. So things change rather rapidly. And I always remember a distinguished gentleman, one I had a great deal of respect for. Any of you ever know or heard a guy named Robert F. Bennett? Robert F. made a quote one time. He said, whatever formula you adopt, if you don't fund it, it will not work. You know, and that's true. And he was a very strong supporter of kids. Well, what happens, and this has happened more than once, we have a tendency to go for, well, starting back in 1992, we had 3 years and didn't change the base. Then you can find other years we did similar. Well, inflation was going up all that time. And so we end up in court. We had a court case, and it started out in about 2000 and come to fruition in about 2004 or 5. And the court said, you're not funding it. So they adopted and made changes in it, and they funded it. Then we did it again. In 2010, they started another lawsuit. And the lawsuit dealt with two things: equity and adequacy. Equity, that wherever your zip code is, those kids are being treated equal. Now, I just want to comment on that just for a minute. I've been in Kansas all my life. And it's awfully easy in Kansas to live in a community, and the community changed, but it's so gradual, you don't think it has. For example, you know that one kid out of every 3 that walks down the halls of Shawnee Mission School District's on free lunch? Most, even if you live here, you don't realize it. And I think now I'd have to check if you're either the lowest income or the poorest as far as free lunch. And many times we don't realize what's happening. We have one district whose free lunch applications total 85%. They don't have fees because there's nobody to pay them. With me? And so you've got to take all that into account when you adopt it. Well, this court case started in 2010. And about a year ago, the district court judges ruled and said you're not meeting the adequacy test in local option budget and capital outlay. You're not meeting the test. So the legislature came back and they put money in for the local option budget and capital outlay. It took about $190-some million. But at the end of the session, last year they reduced it, and it affected the 14-15 school year. So they got cut at that point in time about $52 or $3 million. Now, you'll read in the paper, but state aid still went up, but it was $53 million less than they thought it was going to be. And most of the increase took place in the local option budget. Now, I want you to think about this. You've got a cap on how much you can spend in the local option budget. So if you put more state money in it, what happens? You lower the mill levy. So over $100 million of that went to lower property tax. Schools didn't get to spend any of it. The equity piece on capital outlay, it was cut from about $45 million to $27, and that's technically money they can spend for capital outlay. The other point I wanted to make that I'm trying to keep this as factual as I can. In 2008-9, and the latest we got is 13-14, because 14-15 expenditures aren't all in yet. The total amount per pupil, I mean, that's everything they spend, even down to activity funds, gate receipts at ball games, school lunch program, everything. The increase was $360. $12,600 to $12,960. And you think about that. Most of that, folks, during that period of time was in capers and bonded interest. And Christy can't spend $1 of that. The capers money, we got a new policy on that here a few years ago. The capers computes it, they give us to us, and we send each district a check, and the minute it hits their bank, it pops back to the people. It is not in the district 24 hours. But what happened is a few years ago, and I'll never forget this. Some wish I probably would. But what happened is we sat in a committee meeting and they made changes in capers, the state retirement law. And that applies to cities, counties, to school districts, about everybody. They said, we're going to make some changes. And they said, they asked the actuarial firm, how much will this cost? They said, we can't tell you for 3 years. We have to see what the experience is. Not unusual for actuarials. Well, most people in that committee, particularly the leadership, didn't run again. So we lagged for several years. And we got behind a long ways. And now we're having to make that up, what we didn't pay. The school district's share of capers is paid for the state to hold. That was done originally to hold the property tax down. So the employee pays some, the state pays the remainder for the system. So most of the increase is due to two things. State retirement system, which school districts all participate along with cities, counties, etc. And the second thing is bond and interest. Bond and interest. We keep threatening over the last few years to change the bond and interest law. There's bills introduced to change it. A lot of districts, to protect their taxpayers, had bond issues maybe even a year or two before they intended to because they're afraid he's going to lose state aid. Just a flat fact. One of the Southwest Kansas, a poor district, had one for $87 million. They probably wouldn't have done that till later on, in about a year. But the state aid changed this year. Not on old bond issues, but any new bond issue that is adopted by election after July 1 this year, the state aid will drop about 17%. With me? So that what that does, if the state aid goes down, where does it go to? Property taxpayer. So if Olathe, I think you're working on a bond issue, I believe that's true, and so their bond issue this year, the bond interest payments on the new bond issue, not the old. The old will be in the old law. The new bond issue, the state aid will be about 17 points less than it would have been if you'd had it before June 30th. So we shifted it. But in all that, bear in mind, the school district cannot spend the bond and interest except to pay bonds, and they cannot spend the capers money. They don't even, somebody called up and said, if I have to run this through my books, Superintendent's being in Weisenheimer County, he calls up and he said, can I draw interest or get something for it? No, it hits your bank and it comes straight back to the state retirement office. So, one more thing, 2008-9, the base state aid, which is the basis that everything is geared upon, was $4,400, $4,400. That was the last year of the 3-year plan the court had approved. They cut it a little bit, but not much. In that law at that time, we also had a provision called cost of living, so it would increase based on the cost of living. And before it was implemented, we repealed it. We repealed it. It was supposed to kick in 9-10, but it was repealed. So it was never used. But last year, the base state aid per pupil, which is the basis you apply all the weightings to, was $3,852. What, 6 years earlier? It was $4,400. Now think about that. What is it? $548 less over a 6-year period. It dropped. Now expenditures, went up some. Some of that's property tax. Some of it's bonds. Some of it's capers. But operating money has been very challenging since that time. Districts have done some unusual things. Some with Tears of Rise cut programs. Some increased the pupil-teacher ratio in order to try to give their teachers something. a modest increase. Another big issue, and we don't want to get into that probably today, but another big issue is for schools in this arena is health insurance. This won't happen in your districts because they're big enough that I don't think it'll happen. But we had one district, for example, 800 kids. Well, it was Russell, Kansas. Maybe even Western Kansas, out of Russell. That one year, he had 2 heart surgeries, 2 cancer surgeries, and a premature birth. Stand alone. This Blue Cross Blue Shield guy walks in and said, "You're the worst customer we got. Next year, your rates will be $3,000 for a family." Well, he said, I have teachers that pay me to work, and he had to do something different. But it was a challenge. But that's some of the things schools have. But the total expenditures, 08-09, 13-14, went up $360. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention, because you hear a lot about that, and you will hear it here in Johnson County. In the law, you weight students. There's other ways you can do it. But if you're a low enrollment district, when you get below about 1,600 kids, your cost goes up. Just flat fact. When you have a lot of poverty, your cost goes up. When you have a lot of bilingual kids, your cost goes up. And of course, looking at all that, another one, transportation of children. We've got one of the best, did have till this year, one of the best transportation formulas in the country, except for one thing. You want to guess what that was? We have it based on cost density. It's mileage. 2.5 miles. Been there for 40 years. Now, you're probably the only ones that walk 2.5 miles every day. Every morning and walk it back. With me? You think about how many adults do you think walk 2.5 miles every day and so forth? We wouldn't dare let a kindergarten out here on Metcalf walk 2.5 miles. So the boards have to wrestle with that. And it all centers on the safety of the kids. So anyway, but what we did in 2014-15, in essence, we froze everything except bond and interest and capers, in essence, for 15-16 and 16-17. We froze it. And then they're going to develop a new formula. And the new formula will have to meet the Supreme Court test. The Constitution says you have to provide suitable financing. The legislature believes that that's a legislative matter. The court shouldn't have anything to say about it. The court has not agreed with that. And in November the 6th, about a month from today, there will be a hearing in the Supreme Court on the adequacy piece. No. On the equity piece. On the equity piece. That's about $2 or $3 million. Then in the spring, they'll set the schedule for the adequacy piece. The district court's already ruled on this. They said, we're not meeting the constitutional requirements. So, and of course, the state appealed it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then, I'm just guessing now, on the equity piece that they're going to have a hearing on November 6th, that opinion will probably come down somewhere 3 months, 4 months later. Now, that's maybe a little shorter than normal, but the Supreme Court's already ruled on this once and said they had to do it. They did that about a year ago. And so it went to the district court and so forth, and the legislature cut it. So that'll come down probably 1st February. Then they're going to set the schedule in early spring on the hearing on the adequacy piece. How much does it take to educate a child? You should, and meet the constitutional requirements. And when they do that, that's where the money is. That'll be in most likely, if you base it on the district court opinion, that's where the cost will be. We'll talk about more of this later if you have any questions, but it is very challenging right now for boards of education. Very challenging. And there's even rumors around that they could increase and even double their pay. You know what they get paid? Nothing. You double it, they don't improve very much. But it's been very difficult. There's board members walked out of the board meeting with tears in their eyes of things they had to do. It's very, very difficult. And because any decision you make in the way of additional kids in a classroom, whatever it is, it has an effect on the kids. I never knew a program ever introduced in the school district that didn't affect kids. That's the only reason you do it. But I'll be glad to answer any questions you got. That's kind of a quick scenario where we are.
All right, prepare your questions, and let's challenge the panel. Okay, first up here is...
Does this work?
It does.
Hi, actually, I have an ulterior motive to come up here. I want to get a picture from this side. But my question, Kathy Nix and I had the honor of going to Shawnee Mission South Thursday to watch their political debate. And they discussed Iran, healthcare, all sorts of things. But when it came to education, one team's lead statement was, education is a privilege, not a right. And 20% of the audience agreed with that. And I'm not going to ask you which way you think it goes, but how did our kids get to this point where 20% of them think that it's a privilege and not a right?
Todd, let's start. Todd, let's start with you. I know that's a more difficult one, though.
Well, I don't know any homeschooler that would think it's a privilege versus a right. I mean, they grow up recognizing they're being educated. It's a requirement. It's a requirement more than a privilege or a right, because how are you going to survive in society today if you can't read, if you can't write, if you can't do arithmetic? And so I would say, that that would not be an issue in our constituency.
I don't know that I can answer that question, but I would be very curious to hear the argument that was made for that. I don't necessarily disagree with the concern by that statement, but we are in a democracy, and our students have the right to have those thoughts, and we provide the best education possibilities that we can. But ultimately, again, I would like to hear what the debate was and what their rationale for that statement might have been.
I also don't have the answer to that, and it is concerning to me. Obviously, that is not my viewpoint on it. I do worry in general. It just, society doesn't seem to value education as it did in years past, and I do think our students see that, and this is just me making a theory. Maybe that is where they are getting it. I would be interested in their argument as well and their reasoning behind that thought. But I think that we as a society, it's our duty to put education back at the top of our lists, because our kids are our future, and it breaks my heart to see that not everyone understands and sees it the same way I do, and the same way a lot of my educating friends do, and the people in this field do. And so that's part of why I do what I do, to get it back out there in the light and just get us back on our kids, focus on our kids.
It might be well if they just took a few minutes and read the Constitution for the state of Kansas. I think that'd be helpful in doing that. And most of us had the privilege of going to some pretty good schools. And Shawnee Mission and Johnson County in general, has always had quality education, great pride in their education. Sometimes what we hear, but we might get just a little bit selfish. I talked to a guy the other day, he's a good friend in the Board of Regents. They had a Board of Regents. complaining about, they set policy, complaining about the tuition at higher ed. Do any of you got anybody going to higher ed institutions? Do you have any money left over? Yeah. But he made a point. He said, the guy was complaining about it. And he said, wait a minute. This is the guy got more money in Van Camp's got beans. And he said, wait a minute. He said, when you went to the university, why, the state was paying 50%. Now the state's paying, where he went, is about 20%. Why do you want to discriminate against the kids going now versus when you went? He said, well, never thought about that.
Yeah.
But, we've been treated pretty well. Sometimes we need to think about our kids, too.
Good morning. Is that on? Not on. Good morning. My name's Chris Roselle. I'm a member of the League here. As you know, the League was formed to continue the work after 72 years of struggle for the right to vote of women. So our concern is civic participation, and we do a lot for civic participation. I'm interested to know from all of you what you do to prepare the students for civic participation and what your success rate is. Particularly, how many contact hours do you give each student to prepare them for civic participation? Then what is the registration rate of your graduates from your system? And what is the voter participation rate of your graduates? I say this because I think we have a crisis in which our youth isn't being registered and isn't participating generally. And to me, for the League, that is an extremely important concern. So I'd be interested in all of your responses. Thank you. Oh, one other thing. If you have a solution.
I'd like to start with that one, if I may. And solution-oriented, I appreciate that. I also have a concern in our last bond initiative. And speaking from several different election processes in school districts, voter turnout, even with mail-in ballots, participation is astonishingly low. When ballots are mailed to the home and they don't get returned. I know in our last election, we did look for the bond that was passed a year ago. We did look at our participation rates and our families. Our families are not participating. The majority of our voters are retirees in our community, but still believe in the importance of schools. And I wonder, I think out loud, why? So one of the things, I think it's a fair question, what is our registration rate? Every student is required to take a government class. To me, that's a natural fit for us to continue to stress the importance of participation in the civic process. And that is something that we can go back and do a better job of. Encouraging our students as they reach the voting age to become registered and having those information pieces available, I think, in our schools is a good piece for us to consider. I can't speak to our actual turnout off the top of my head. I don't know those numbers. But we can look at ways to get those numbers. But I think there is a shared concern.
All of our students also, in order to graduate, must take a government class, as well as U.S. history their junior year typically is when that class falls. So I know that my instructors spend some time discussing civic duties, what they can do, how they can do it. I know that's one of the biggest questions. How do I even do it? How do I go about it? So they work on that. We did also, for Constitution Day, have an assembly where we go over those things. And we did that high school-wide so that all of the students could hear that. I think it's important for even the younger ones. It's not quite there yet, but it'll be there. It's right around the corner. You'll be of that age, and you need to make sure you understand what that means, how important that is, and then go ahead and take that step and get registered. Our counselor has made available and helped some students do that, as well as our social worker at our school also gets that question from time to time, and our government teacher, of course. I think he probably gets the most of that. As far as the number that actually follow through in our voter turnout, I don't have those numbers either. It would be really interesting, and I'm sitting here thinking, how could I figure that out pretty quickly? Maybe at the end of the year, we do a little graduation survey. That might be something that would be interesting to know. How many of them took that step and did get themselves registered? So thank you for that thought-provoking question, and now I'm going to continue to mull it over. Because it is very important. I see it all the time in my own neighborhood. You get the ballots, and then folks just never get around to it, and the next thing they know, it got buried. And so continuing to kind of preach it at work, at school with the kids in my neighborhood, continuing to get the word out that is something that is important, and we do need to get younger populations informed and out there voting it's a very important priority.
Just a brief comment. I'm not sure it's just kids, young people. We've got an attitude across the state a little bit. My vote don't count, so I won't go vote. And I think it's not young adults. I think it's all of us. There's a tendency to say, well, my vote don't count, so I'm not going to worry about it, and I don't make a difference. And I voted last time, and my main person didn't win, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to take time to do it. It's unfortunate, but we have to change some attitudes, I think, across the state, period.
I have one of these.
I just want to add one more piece. You know, we talk a lot about partnerships. It's not just with our business community, it's with our parents and families. And I'm just going to tell you, I grew up going to the voting booth with my parents. I remember being stuck in the little, and watching my parents do that. My parents were both teachers. They believed in the importance of education and civic duty. But that was modeled for me from the time that I was a little bit. How many of our kids get to see their parents going to the polls like that? How many of our families sit down with their kids and say, this is the ballot, this is what this is why it's important? So I think Mr. Dennis made a great point that, you know, I think it's more than just our kids. I think we have to engage our families in that process as well.
National research shows that homeschoolers vote and attend public meetings more frequently than the general population. 100% of our graduates that are able to vote are registered to vote. My children have been involved in political campaigns. My oldest daughter was the political director of the Republican Party of Kansas. She started working in campaign. So when I go out to meetings and say, oh, are you Corey Kangas' dad? And she worked for the Attorney General of Kansas at one time. She's left the political career, went and got another bachelor's, now finished her doctorate in nursing. But my kids have marched in parades. They've gone out and handed out, distributed voting information before primaries. And homeschoolers typically will get engaged and work on political campaigns, which is one of the very interesting things. Because it's part of your education. We can count these as educational hours because they're actually feet on the street doing political work. They're learning about the process of government. And so it's one of the great things that we see. It's a right that we have, and we've got the flexibility in our schedule to work it in to our day.
I have a very specific question about funding, a specific thing. The virtual teacher did not mention how her students get their computers and if they have funding help for that. That's my question.
At our schools, and I do know it varies by virtual school in the state of Kansas, our students, if they are free and reduced lunch or special education students, they automatically qualify. And we provide that. There is no extra funding that comes for that. The virtual schools in the past, this year is a little bit different with the block grant and what they wrote in for the funding for the virtual schools this year. We get the base state aid per pupil, and that is That is it. No extra funding for special education, Title I, things like that. So there is no extra money coming into the virtual schools for the computer piece.
Good morning. I am pleased to see the variety of persons who are here to speak about education, something that's near and dear to many of us, all of us here at the League. The question that I have centers around excellence and quality. And since there is always this cry for accountability, my question looks at ACT scores and the average of those. I'd like for each to tell us what their average ACT score is, as well as the breakdown, the mathematics, and then the reading or language arts component. I think that's very important for us as we talk to others about these educational options.
Todd, want to start?
I can only tell you my most recent, she was a 32. And she's at Kansas University now on a Chancellor Scholarship. But
I'd like to know the average.
oh yeah, I mean, we don't have an average. All we have is compared to the standardized test. And so we don't have an average on homeschoolers as far as ACT nationally. But I can see if we can, if anyone's done the research. I was just looking for different research on that. We just have in there like the Stanford achievement tests and things that homeschoolers were their scoring. But
I was wanting for the state of Kansas so that these.
I will see if we can. If all we could do is send out a survey among members. I mean, and I'll see if we can find out.
There's probably some information since the colleges are accepting them, but I'm.
Well, they are. They are.
And you asked some tough questions to recall right off the top of my head, but I'll do my best. I cannot speak to the breakdown in the scores, but I believe our composite just came out at 23.5. It is good. We are often compared in the local newspaper across districts, so we feel really good about where we stand.
The composite average for us for this year was 20, I want to say 0.3, but don't quote me on that point, but it was around 20. We have a very small population of our students that actually take the ACT. That is one thing that we are focusing more and more each year. We did see a big jump last year, I believe it was 7 or 8. This past year, then, the scores that just came out, we had 17. So we are making some strides in that area, but that is one thing that we are working with our counselors to increase the number of students that get out there and take that ACT.
One thing I'd say is that Johnson County traditionally is always above the national and state averages.
Thank you. I understand that there's only one per customer, so I have other questions, but I'll come afterwards.
My name is Jane Dissler, and I am newly retired and proud of it. I taught at Shawnee Mission South for 24 years and took a year off to go overseas. My husband's an architect. We had an opportunity to be in Taipei. Taught at Shawnee Mission East for 10 years before that. Taught for Jesus, and when I found out from John Ziegler that my retirement would be a loaf of bread, I said, thank you very much. We actually bought our house at Blue Valley North, in the Blue Valley North District, because I have a daughter who tests very highly, but she can't put her laundry in the dirty clothes. So she's a doctor teaching at Harvard now. So obviously it worked out well. I gotta say that as a teacher, and I will always be a teacher, 2 boys called me on my cell phone, and I'm like, how did they get my number? And they go, Mrs. D, there's somebody in your room. And I'm like, excuse me? And I go, how did you get this number? And they go, there's somebody in your room. And the other one said, do you have cancer or something? You're always here a week early. What's going on? I'm like, I retired. Didn't you pay attention? But anyway, here's my question. I retired because I think it's impossible to do the job that we have always wanted to do in education anymore. I mean, teaching 6 classes, I'm good with the ne'er-do-wells. I've always been good with the ne'er-do-wells. My husband would say, you can park that teaching mode at the door. My basketball guy said to the freshmen, don't mess with her. She could have been an engineer. Like, why are you messing with her? She likes to do this. And our class is after yours. But you get, yes, my question is, how do you expect teachers to do what they've always done when they're teaching 6 classes? I can see mental health issues coming at all the schools I know and love because one-on-one, kids need attention. And if you're cramming 6 classes a day with, 28 kids, and they all have issues, how do you get around to doing that? So, and the people that don't have kids, your property values follow education. So that's my question. How do you deal with more and more to do in less and less time?
Yes, that's a great question. That is something that I know my administrative team, we're constantly talking about. Anytime something new comes up that we need to be doing, the conversation immediately transitions to how can we do this with our teachers and not make it one more thing on their plate. We help where we can. We look at providing professional development days where they can focus on those tasks. A big one when the new standards came out was making sure we're familiar with those new standards and aligning our curriculum, and we know exactly how we want to address each standard, and that takes time, lots and lots of time. I'm fortunate my teachers are year-round, so we have the summer months, June and July, where we crank through tons of fabulous collaboration, professional development together, and that is what we spend our summers doing. So that then they can start the year fresh. All of that planning is done. They have some time to even, everybody says, oh, virtual, you don't need to set up your classrooms, but you've got PowerPoint decks, and you've got to get more creative with your get-to-know-you activities, and how are you going to make this live session that you have energetic and fun, where they will stay online the entire time and not go to Facebook or something else. So we spend the summer months doing that. That has been very beneficial, and I know that I'm very lucky in that I have those months where I have my teachers there and we can work on those things, and they value that time. The summer is a lot of great team building and just getting in together.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I don't have an answer for your situation. I know, like I said, the first thing in homeschoolers is the fact that it's a life commitment, and how do they do it? Whatever their student classroom size is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I was at a wedding last night, and the young man was homeschooled, the oldest of 11, and his mom's homeschooling all 11. Well, he's now in college, so that all are at the same time. But it's a daunting task for anybody in education because it's such a demanding career. If it's in the public education, private, or homeschooling. And just the time and emotional reserves it requires. How do you refresh and recharge your heart and soul? And that would be, something that is above and beyond, I think, the academic scope we have here today.
I truly appreciate the question. I think we have to acknowledge the needs that are changing in our population. Mental health is a tremendous need that we are seeing, and those services that our families can connect with to support the needs of kids that are in our classrooms, that is an increasing challenge. I think we have to think differently as public educators about where our resources go and look for the possibilities and think outside the box. I know that's kind of a phrase that may be overused. But with that, I would say looking for where we can shift some of the things that have been more organizational tasks that have been placed on some of our administrators, maybe even some of our counselors, and think differently about how we can support them so that they can help us with supporting the needs. Revisiting how our social workers are assigned and how they are supporting kids. What resources we provide those individuals to try and work with our families. And continuing to look at the partnerships available in our community. I think that is a tremendous need that we have seen in the last couple of years. I also think, going back to what you heard my initial comments, the relevance in instruction. The world's different, and it's going to continue to change, and we have to embrace that and acknowledge that. Our kids are different. They're plugged in. They Google everything. So some of the more traditional ways that we've taught, we've got to look past those and shift, because their attention spans are a little different than they were, and I see that even in my own kids. So I don't know that I have all the answers, but I think we have to first acknowledge that those things are happening in our classrooms in order to address them.
If we don't take care of teachers, take care of teachers, we're headed for trouble as a society, as a state. You've got to take care of your teachers. And some people, and we probably, teachers are so good at kind of doing what needs to be done. Let me give you an example. What did you teach?
My kids would say manners, but algebra 2 and algebra 1.
All right, now, you think about this. If you're teaching a math class, or you're teaching a language arts class, and you give an assignment, and how many kids would you have a day?
Let's see, 28 times 5 plus 140 in study hall. No, 89 in study hall. I don't know. That's over my math.
Okay.
Just kidding.
You're close to it. You're going to have, as far as teaching, at least 150 kids. That fair? In that ballpark. Okay, you give an assignment. That assignment, to be effective, it's got to be evaluated and reviewed. So she gets the opportunity to go home that night and grade, review, write notes, and the notes got to be different. What you tell one kid is not what you tell another kid. What one needs is a little love, one needs a little help, whatever it is. And I always think about one of the teachers of the year not very long ago. On Sunday morning, her family went to a restaurant, central part of the state, went to a restaurant for breakfast. And old farmer came in, he said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Every time I go by that school, I go by 3 or 4 times a day and night. Your car's always there. I just figured you lived there." But the point of it is, we forget what has to be done outside of school. And that is extremely stressful. It's a tough road to teacher by far to these kids. So anyway, we don't take care of them, we'll pay the price later on.
We'll take 2 more quick questions. We're really at our time limit, but you've been standing in line. You've been very patient. So.
Good. I'll try to be quick. My name's John Greenwell. I'm well experienced in the organization here, all of 2 hours and 1 minute. Now, Dr. Dennis, you've already actually answered this question in a way. You know, how do we get the vote out? How do we get people to vote? And you said change of attitude. But what I'd like to know is hands-on. That's the reason why I'm here. Is that in Cleveland South we had 27% vote the last election, November. So it's one out of 5. Or let's say it's 2 out of 3. So how can we effectively get these people already registered and everything to vote in this coming elections? Is there any hands-on things that you can do? And the last thing is, I was an outside salesman 53 years, so you know I'm very shy and everything. But anyhow, what is any suggestions we could do that's within reason?
The only thing I'd mention is I think it's got to be discussed in every civic, community, club, churches, whatever. Think of all the civic clubs you got in town. I mean, you got bunches of them. You got to start talking about it wherever those people go. They got to realize the importance of their vote, and their vote does make a difference. Somehow you got to change the attitude, and you got to go where they are. And I think if you're involved in all those civic community groups and churches and all that, the importance of that, I think, can make a big difference. It's important.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Roseanne Stone King.
I'm Roseanne Stone King. I'm a retired teacher and member of the league. And I would like to ask our educators, how can we help our students to be more alert and informed in how to distinguish between fact and opinion and to recognize propaganda?
Great question. One is that, it's going to be one of the things in education, what's the difference between fact and opinion? And from a homeschool perspective, we see some of the curriculum are coming out, and there may be a sense of paranoia or something, thinking that the curriculum's being rewritten in ways to make it somebody's opinion rather than fact. And so how do you do it? Well, first you have to have something that's absolute truth. What is truth? Homeschoolers start with a worldview that there is a source of truth, and that's the Bible. And so,
That's a matter of opinion.
well, I'm just saying, homeschoolers, I recognize that you all won't agree with me, necessarily, everyone here, but I'm just saying that, so they take a look and say, they have a source of truth. I mean, my daughter's a social worker in a public school, and she was told at her master's degree program that there are no absolutes in this class. First paper she turned in, they said, we can't grade this. We need you to rewrite it. She goes, what would you like done? And she goes, well, we can't tell you. I said, well, they absolutely wouldn't grade it. So there was an absolute. So absolutes are there, but how do you determine it? Well, one, you choose, for us, we choose the curriculum and research what we want to help support our worldview. And that's where we would come from and choose, okay? You have your choice of the curriculum you have and the worldview that you represent. That's where your facts and opinions come from the curriculum you choose. So I would say that's what it's based on from our perspective.
I would say that we start education at the elementary level, and fact and opinion comes into our curricular standards, I believe, at third grade with our 8-year-olds. And we look at a variety of informational sources. We are increasingly pulling in informational text, where when I was an elementary learner, it was more novels for reading, but we have a blend so that students are encountering informational text, where they're looking at citing sources, even at the age of 8. Our library media programs, that's the new focus. It's not just on library, but also media literacy. There's a barrage of information that our children can encounter now because they are so plugged in with the tablets and so forth at earlier ages. So they have to be encountering different skills for looking at fact and opinion. And that is part of our assessment system.
Yes, it is part of our curriculum as well. Starting in the elementary school level, I love this question. I was an English teacher, high school English teacher for 11 years prior to moving into administration. So it boils down to me to teaching the kids to ask why and how do you know that. Even with my 5-year-old, I will tell you Nickelodeon Junior is great at their marketing. And every day there's a new toy that we want because it's the best toy ever. How do you know that? Why? And so starting young, I think we involve our learning coaches, give them ideas of how to practice that just in day-to-day. And then also, of course, embedding it in the curriculum. Definitely with the KCCRS, we've moved more to informational text and having those students take their thinking and their questioning skills to a higher level, go more in depth, but learning to challenge what they're being given. And then the other huge piece, as an English teacher, was near and dear to my heart, and still is making sure that the kids understand what is a true resource you can trust and what is not. And that's a huge piece of it as well.
She asked the last question.
Good morning to everyone. My question is, what are the benefits and the cost savings for homeschoolers to participate in advanced classes?
Which advanced classes, for example?
Band, sports.
Okay. Well, for the homeschoolers, I mean, in the metropolitan area like Johnson County, almost every one of those type of activities we already have. We've got basketball, football, baseball, band, debate, choir, all sorts of activities that parents are funding. But if there are some things that, there are some that are taking advantage in the public schools. So what that does, I believe they get, for whatever classes they take, I believe the public schools receive cost for the amount of time that they're participating. But for example, as far as advanced students or advanced studies, most homeschoolers I know in Johnson County are in the Quick Step program at Johnson County Community College, doing the dual enrollment program, getting both high school and college credit At the same time, my daughter graduated with 2 years of college when she was a high school senior.
Let's give our panelists a round of applause. You all have the golden opportunity of talking with each of these individuals. I'm going to take your placards and them back. And if you have further questions that you would like to ask or gain knowledge on, please don't hesitate to go to the appropriate table, and you can visit more than one table. So thank you very, very much for your attention this morning. And again, another big thank you for these